Hi everyone. My name is Alex University. I'm the film programmer here at Japan Society. My colleague Peter Tatara is up in the booth. This is our second to last screen at Japan Cuts, unfortunately. And in a sense, this is almost our closing night title because we have an encore presentation of Shin Godzilla after. So it's really, really exciting to see such a full house for this film. This film is quite remarkable. It's really, I think, if you're not familiar with the Japanese education system, it's a really insightful way to know about how distinct it is from an American way of life in some sense. But without really going too into it, I'd really just like to invite the filmmaker, Ema Ryan Yamazaki, to the stage to talk very briefly.
Hi, thank you for coming and thank you for waiting, and I hope it's worth it. This is the New York premiere of this film, my film, that's actually taken 10 years from conception to this date. So I'm very excited to share it with you. Although I now live in Tokyo, I spent 10 years in New York, and this is where I learned how to make films, dream big, and this is one of those results. And a lot of people in this room also has taught me how to make better films and helped me make this film, so I really appreciate it. And it's really just, I can leave you with the idea that although this is a film about a school, it's my attempt to ponder on why Japan is the way it is, the country as a whole, the society as a whole. So I hope you kind of have that thought in your head, and I look forward to answering questions after the film. Enjoy it.
So I first wanted to ask you, as you mentioned earlier in the intro, it took this idea was like 7 years in the making in a sense. So where did it come from? And just want to ask you why you were interested in doing the educational system.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the applause. So I went to a school like this in rural Osaka. I was that little girl, Ayame, the first grade girl that maybe you cried with and cheered for. I really think that ultimately. But because of, after elementary school, I became more internationalized. I went to like an American school in Japan and then moved to New York for college. And I just, in my mid-20s, when I was thinking about why I became who I was, and especially in New York, I was just doing what I thought was a normal thing to do as a person working, and I would often get compliments about working really hard, being on time, being responsible, being a good team player, and I was just like, I think I'm just Japanese, like an average Japanese person, and I was just benefiting, I feel like, from these characteristics I had, and I realized that what I went through in elementary school, and it being not normal that you, of course, clean your own classrooms and serve each other lunch. And I lived for my role as like turning on the lights in the morning or my broadcast announcement department job, And it was so normal to me to have this responsibility. It wasn't a burden. And I think I got the best of both worlds. I think in Japan, this type of education continues on as you reach teenage life and beyond. And something is personally, I think it gets a bit too much, but because I switched school systems in the middle, I just feel like I got the best of Japanese education and the Western. And I wanted to, as I kept thinking about as I was living in New York, people would be, there'll be films about sushi and, people want to talk to me about ninjas and they're great, but, I feel like what I'm interested to do is to, again, as I said in the intro, think about why Japan is the way it is, for better or for worse. And it took me to leave Japan to see the great things about Japan also, but it's all gray. Everything that's great about Japan is also what makes it quite difficult to live there. It's all good and bad, or neither. And I think I wanted to explore that in a school setting and obviously lean on the magic of childhood. And, I like to try to tell personal, emotional stories, even if I have these bigger themes, and I think doing it at a school just made sense.
And I think also doing it at a school feels almost unprecedented in a way. because you went in and you filmed for a year. Am I right? Elementary school kids. How did you even manage to do that?
Yeah, so the reason I said it took 10 years actually is for the first 6, no school would let me in. I mean, it's just like, it's a public school. I wanted it to be a public school so that I could basically say that a version of this happens everywhere in Japan. And, I also when I started wanting to make this film, I'd never made a feature film, and I made 2 of the features before I arrived here. And once I got in, in terms of just the kids, we were there for 150 days. So not every school day, but a lot enough for people. We were just part of the system, The teachers would put their own lav mics on in the morning. And for the first graders, we were never not there for them. I think they thought we were part of school. So I wonder, in second grade, they were just like, where did the cameras go? We were just part of it. And of course, there's always moments when, kids want to wave at the camera, but so little of that because we want it to be, of course there's always interference, I understand that in any filmmaking, but the goal, at least for the kids and eventually the teachers, is you can't just be on and then different. We're so there that you got to do your jobs and we'll capture it, and I had 700 hours of footage to pick from to try to capture, what I felt in this school, because I spent thousands of extra hours there too, just being there and observing. And I like to think my type of documentary films. In Japan, often documentaries are still considered like a record or something, or somehow some sort of objectivity. But for me, it's my perspective or what happened. It can't be anything else. And I think everything you saw in the film, I saw 100 times, and I captured the best version of how I captured it is what you get to see, because you couldn't be there. Yet I wanted people who see the film to feel like they were. That's the goal. So, but it was not easy to say, and you just have to, figure out a way for them to say yes. Actually, ultimately, in the year of the Tokyo Olympics, obviously COVID messed things up, but ultimately we figured out this city of Setagaya was going to be the host for the US Olympics team, and we thought maybe then this city, for filmmakers like us, would be interested in showcasing one of their schools to the world, and eventually that opened the door to, the mayor, the educational board. It was a whole community that needed to say yes. And when COVID hit, it was canceled, and we postponed for a year. And I decided to go forward anyway, because actually I thought some of my themes were accentuated during COVID. There was a choice to just give up and start over 5 years later, but it was not easy to. But again, I heard here schools were closed for so long, and most of this school year was happening probably where a lot of US schools weren't even in-person learning. So again, a lot was asked to sacrifice for, but the kids kept going to school and had magical memories, So ultimately, I hope as time passes is also like a record of this bizarre time that we all went through,
And you mentioned that you had over 700 hours of footage. How did you approach the edit? Was this something that you edited as, the school year went on? And also, we have so many characters that you find, like Mako and Ayame, how did you choose them in a sense?
So I started my career as an editor, and I still edit all my stuff, and I had some help with some co-editors for this film. But it's kind of where I find the story, and this is the type of filmmaker I am. And so we had to organize as we went, and every weekend ideally, or when the school was in break, I would see a summary of the footage to have a sense of what we had actually captured, because often I would send the crew into a classroom, and then my job would be to find something even more interesting in the school. I was just running around. Once I put my crew in the classroom, I wasn't there anymore. They had my full trust to capture the best way what was unfolding, and there was nothing I could do. So often I wasn't there, so it was really important for me to watch as I went. We had obviously so many more potential characters, but ultimately my idea was always for the school itself to be a main character. And so the people in it, I knew it was gonna be many, many. I didn't know it was gonna be 10 named characters. I thought somewhere between 5 and 15. And ultimately, it's a combination of having the support of the parents, capturing the right thing at the right time, and then things happening to these kids that ultimately, ideally, I hope my intention was that one person's experience kind of feeds into the other. It's a collective year, even though that's why you see a few kids just for like a chapter, and that was intentional. But so it was always a balance, and when a story like Ayame's happens towards the end, you need all of that too. You need the camera and the mics and the relationships and everybody to feel comfortable. And it just happened in the last 2 months of the school year. It was like, you're waiting for that kind of, because that stuff is happening all the time, and it's just a matter of like, and then she becomes a character, but we weren't filming her necessarily a lot from the beginning of the school year, but thank goodness we were filming everybody. And then you find the footage of her and things like that. So the story really finds itself in the editing, but I'm also obviously like, it's not just like, let's see what we get, it's kind of like a directing, editing. Well, I guess that's what I do, yeah.
I wanted to ask you whether you could speak about the title, which I think is something you probably took a long time to think about, but it's quite like a striking title in a sense.
Yeah, The Making of a Japanese, and I say it with irony, I say it with intention. I kind of feel like I get away with saying it. My father is British, and people have always questioned if I'm Japanese enough, like am I Japanese? And I've had to kind of deal with that question and fight that question and accept myself with that question. And so I think I have a say, and again, it's just, when I was pitching this film to try to get it made, like I've never had a title the title itself and it's in a public elementary school. Like that was the concept, and it was so clear. And it does speak to like Japan, is still quite homogeneous compared to a city like New York. It is changing, but I think, and I understand within that there's like more variation. But I think, I often wonder what makes someone Japanese, and I've always been told for myself, or in people who are mixed race or something, you have to have Japanese passport, or speak the language, or grow up there, or born there. There's different definitions. I always feel like my answer now is like, if you go to a Japanese elementary school, you're Japanese. And if not, because I do feel like 5-year-olds around the world are like kind of similar, like here, Japan, free-spirited, but 12 years old, there's a distinct Japanese person, I feel like, and maybe not necessarily in other places. And I just went with that theory, and obviously, you want your film to be seen, and the title is not the same in Japanese because the goal is not to like be provocative necessarily. I just want people to think about a bigger story than 1 year of a school. It's connected to society. So the Japanese title is Shogakko, sore wa chisana shakai, elementary school, a small society in of itself type of title, but I think it has the same meaning, and that's really what I also mean with the English title.
I think I'm going to ask one last question before we open it up to an audience. I think everybody kind of focuses on Ayame and the symbol. I was curious about how formative you think, these kind of strict teaching methods can be, because you show it and I think everybody sympathizes with her and they think the teacher is really cruel, but towards the end there's almost a pathway to success.
Yeah, so I think one of the themes that emerged and what I thought about in making the film is how strict are we going to be with our kids? And Japan was much stricter, and I grew up 30 years ago in Japan that was much stricter than what you saw. I was actually shocked at how not strict it was, and people were, and it's a balance, right? There's a good and a bad. Like if you've ever visited Japan or like Japan for the trains running on time and people having order and these type of things, like you can't. Well, you can, but I'm going to call you out if you think our system is too strict. We're not born this way. We're educated this way to create the society that, especially the West, praises for Japan. So I think, I wonder as I make these films, my previous film was about Japanese high school baseball, again, as a microcosm of Japanese society. And as I've made these two films, I wonder, this next generation, even if it feels strict compared to what you might be used to, is less, and so when they're running our society, will Japanese trains be a few minutes late? It's not just automatic and then is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Will more people be happy to have a little bit of looseness? Like the professor said, we have many issues, suicide rates and things like this. Just sometimes it's really suffocating, and will that be better? I don't know, but it's all connected, and that's what I wanted to point out. I don't have the answers, and in for me, I really valued the experience of overcoming obstacles. And I think I became pregnant during the shoot of this film, and I gave birth to my son like 6 weeks after the last shoot date, and I edited this film as I kind of had my first year with him. And even as I, now I'm a parent, I really think no matter what, and I don't want, I get it, I don't want my kid to cry unnecessarily, but I want him to face challenges, work hard, and overcome them. And I think in this day and age, it's easier to be a teacher that isn't strict and wants to be your friend. And I get it, emotional well-being, I get it, it's so important. I wish we could have it all, but I do think that it's harder to be a strict teacher. And I really, first of all, I respect teachers. It's so hard. It's an impossible job, it feels like, to deal with, what they're being asked to do. But they do it with love and intention, and I think it's not all bad. And and again, like, if we think it is, then Japan should think about changing that. But this is what's going on, and schools are so closed that I think it's rare to get such an access to a school. So I want people to think about it. I want education to be discussed more, and because it doesn't feel like that, especially in Japan. And for these reasons, I included these scenes that I did. Yeah.
Okay, so let's raise the lights up a bit, and if you want to ask a question, just raise your hand, and just make sure to keep it nice and succinct, so we can. Thank you. How about, where do you think? Right here? Yes, you. On the one. So the mic's coming straight.
First of all, congratulations on just a beautiful feature film. I felt so many waves of emotion. It was so beautifully done. Thank you for sharing this with us. My question is, how did it feel to see the same group of children be simultaneously told to break out of their shell and not to get wrapped up in just going with the flow, while also be told to not upset the balance of the group, especially as first graders and sixth graders? Like, what were your thoughts while witnessing all of that?
Yeah, right. It's like not possible. Like it's like life at schools is full of contradictions, and I think first of all, a school like that has 50 teachers, and it's not by coincidence. Even though the egg breaking shell was by a different teacher with Ayame, the strict Enomoto teacher, and Watanabe, the lady teacher who Ayame runs over to, is by design that both of those teachers are around her, and they know obviously each other exists, and Enomoto knows that she has, like, it's like good cop, bad cop in a little bit. And I'm always amazed at the balance of the system. And as you learn, often these teachers are rotated out every 5 to 6 years. So it's like everywhere, pretty much this is happening. And so a lot of different teachers have different styles, and they require kids to do different things. And I think, but kids are smart, and I think it's actually, I think what I saw kids learn is, like, depending on the setting, right? Like some moments they get their moment, but I did kind of see, like, with the skipping rope prince, which I like to call him, like only in Japan, right? There's an activity like skipping rope, which is an individual activity, become like a collective challenge. But again, like seeing, it was about breaking out of his shell while also like being together. And in a weird way, like, I think your question points me to something like that, where even though I started the answer being like, it's not possible, like, and so it is complicated, and that's why I like to say nothing is so clearly black and white, and where the answers lie, Yeah, thank you.
All right, another question? Well, let's try for somewhere right down here.
Hi. My question, since COVID was looming over all of this, and you'd already said that that experience maybe accentuated some aspects of the educational system, maybe you wanted to highlight. My question is whether or not COVID maybe prevented you from showing aspects that maybe you did want to show to a wider audience.
I think it's all masked, right? And like, I so enjoyed your reactions to everything where it almost, I feel like for me at least, you stop seeing the mask, like you can still see their expressions, but of course, as a filmmaker, that's like an extreme challenge, and I had to go with it. And I wished, obviously, that mask came off somewhere in the middle of the school year or something, and it just didn't happen. And just things, school trips, like sports day, everything was scaled down. And, for me, those were like the star scenes. But actually, again, what came out of it was like seeing how you can still be creative within crazy restrictions. Like, did you see Yutaro's mask with like a slit in the middle so he could still blow on his accordion? It's just like the crazy things that education didn't stop. And I was filming this at the time. I remember especially the fall of 2021, I think there's a big discussion in the rest of the world about like how are kids gonna go back to school? And they've been in school for like a year already. And it was just, again, I think I made the most of it. I went with it, and ultimately I hope that, I made a film that I could only make in this time. But of course, like on a daily basis, it was, you always wish for, not just with COVID, but when you make a documentary, you always wish you had filmed that thing that you saw but didn't catch. Like, it's all about that. So I think ultimately my method is to like trust the process. Once you have the access you need and you stick with it and you have the right people making it with you in place, like the story will come together, whatever that is. And the balance of like having an intention going in to tell a story, but being open to what's there, or else what are you doing? You're making fiction. So like that balance, I think, was more true than ever, during this film.
I think we have time for one or two questions. Okay, right here.
Thank you, Emma. Really, really enjoyed the movie. I feel that it has your voice, your strengths, humor, and the emotional touch. So thank you for that. My question is around what you said about overcoming obstacles. I know that both of us are moms for young kids, and that's something that I value a lot. I'm curious, what are some of the obstacles you have to overcome to make this film, especially in the culture context? And also as a larger question, as mixed race and also half Japanese living in New York City, you mentioned about you get the best of both worlds. I'm curious, what are some of the conflict you actually have to adjust in the culture larger context? Thank you.
Thank you. Obstacles, I just feel like there were endless, even though I got the film made and I knew that to do that I had to film until the last day of school. And it was never a given. I had a mostly supportive community, but it's 1,000 kids and double the number of parents, and at any moment, we did my, and it was I failed for 6 years because I actually didn't have the support of the surrounding educational board and mayor level type of thing. So it was just all, having all of that kind of constantly relying on just having as many supporters as possible and taking the time to build relationships with everyone, not just like the parents of the kids that you don't know who's going to be in the film, you don't know who's going to, the story is going to start. So just spending the time so that if some hiccup happened, I had enough people who would speak on my behalf, and get, bad rumors wouldn't destroy the film, and just again getting to the finish line, or I could film up until before graduation or before the final performance, and I would have no film. So it was constantly just doing what the due diligence to keep up the human relations, to not catch COVID, or for my camera person to we had to be tested constantly, and we were just lucky that none of us had it when it was a crucial day to be there. Just things like that we lucked out. And yeah, in terms of the best of both worlds, I think the good way to say it's the best of both worlds, and I truly believe that. Again, being able to learn the value of community and group while also figuring out who you are as a person, but also having consideration for others. I just think is in a nutshell what I mean, and I think is the best of my Japanese side and what I learned in New York, which was you gotta speak up and be an individual or no one cares and no one listens, and you have to kind of fight for yourself as an individual. And as I started going back and forth, I was told in Japan I was over like speaking of myself too much. Like I had to really balance, but because in New York no one else speaks for you, but in Japan it's actually better if someone else is telling that person how great you are, so to speak. And so it's the constant cultural, and I feel like a chameleon in a way, but again, like I grew up doing all of that, like, to constantly be navigating who to be in different cultures. So I think that's a skill, and I think we need more of that in this century in our kids. So I think having a positive spin on it that I have now versus my previous version of myself, which was like, more like upset about it, just like making the most of it. I think I've really now landed with that, and with my own son, like this is something I can, instill in him as well. Yeah.
One last question. What do you think? Maybe right in the middle? Yeah. Oh, we'll pass the mic. Don't worry.
First, congratulations. It was a wonderful experience to watch this. I'm a documentary line producer, so my question is related to the logistics. Obviously, filming for 150 days is incredibly costly, so I'm curious to know about the fundraising and how you were able to keep the ship moving, for lack of a better word. Thank you.
So the key, I've done a lot of work in collaboration with NHK, the public broadcaster, which I think is really important because a version of this film aired to the Japanese public, and that reaches millions in a way like a feature film doesn't. And in return for making that version, I get to keep the rights of the film and do whatever we want to do with it, but also I get some funding to start the film. And in this case, it was crucial that I found a camera person that was an NHK employee. So part of the scheme was that I had him for a year. And that cut, obviously there were still costs, but that cut a lot of it. And I took years to find this person because I'm very picky, and shooting styles at NHK in Japan is just not what I was used to in New York. And actually, I want to shout out a few people, but Michael Crommett, who shot my previous film, hi Michael, was integral to kind of mentoring this Japanese young camera person, Kazuki Kakurai, who shot my film, to kind of, again, best of both worlds, right? Learn from each other, but then ultimately, understand what I wanted for my film. But that was part of it. Eventually, we pitched at places like Hot Docs, and it became a Finnish-French co-production, and then the New York Times came in. I'm doing OpDoc. Hi, New York Times partners, thank you so much. So watch out for the OpDocs version. So we kind of then piecemealed it, and it obviously helps that I'm the director-editor, and ultimately I make money doing other things, and I never expect to make money off of the feature project. And I actually work with my husband, Eric Nyari, who's the producer, who's not here because he's with our son in Tokyo. But when you're a husband and wife doing a lot of those roles, and we design our life so that the feature that I get to make every few years is, we lead our lives to that. And during this year, I shot at the Tokyo Olympics, the official Tokyo Olympics documentary, as a job during the summer and in the nights and on the weekends, and that was literally how I made my income. So there's we do a lot of things to think outside of the box. We don't just try to break even or make a profit out of the feature films itself. I'll be happy one day if I did, but I also, for the feature films, I just don't want to be in a situation where I'm being told to make choices that I don't agree with. So I'll do anything else to kind of protect that. Yeah.
Well, I think on that note, thank you.
Thank you. Just some crew members, Andrew who did the sound mix, Naoko who did the graphics, especially, and all of the key crew, and just people who supported, watched cuts, you all in the audience, so thank you so much. You all it's not a one-person show, every person, it takes a village, and I appreciate all the support. Thank you so much.